Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Welcome. Thank you, everybody, for coming to the first Startup Grind of 2016. I'm really excited. I'm glad to see you all. Thank you for coming, braving the storm. Real quick, we're going to have a couple quick announcements. Startup Grind team, I've been meaning to do this for a while, and I always forget to, so I want to recognize everybody that helps make this possible. I'm always the one on stage being loud and annoying, but there's a lot of people behind. This needs to make it happen. Matthew Pelkey, David Themecki, you can't make it. Liz Callahan, Liz, Dylan, Aaliyah, Markel, Nick, Neil Carroll on the video, John Leone, David Murphy, Lon Gainey, spelling name wrong, sorry, Deuce, John Leone is on there twice, and Drew Rossini. Thank you. I really appreciate all your help. It would not be possible to pull off these awesome events without you. So real quick, recapping 2015, we had some great events. Maybe you attended some of them, maybe you didn't, but I enjoyed it. I hope you did. We're continually trying to improve, so if you have any feedback, please let us know. We sent out a survey. Your responses would be greatly appreciated. And we're excited for a great 2016, and we're going to kick it off right in a couple minutes. Thank you to our sponsors, Culligan Law, Matthew Pelkey, and David Culligan. Dig, Sean, you want to talk real quick about space here? Sure.
How many of you have been in Dig before? The rest of you, obviously, it's your first time. Welcome back. If you haven't noticed, we've made a significant amount of changes to Dig and many more to come. Not only in Dig, but in the building. But I do want to just briefly take a moment to tell you a little bit about Dig. It is the largest co-working space in the region, and we are working on building our membership. So if anybody is interested in having an alternative place to work, just somewhere to go after work, somewhere to come and just chill out and get some emails done, please come talk to me. I'll be hanging out all night. We are part of the BNMC, or the Buffalo Niagara Medical Campus. A lot of people don't know about our affiliation with the BNMC, but overall, we work to make the campus a healthier and way more engaging yet productive place to live around and work within. So please come talk to me. We'd love to have you in Dig more often.
Thank you. Matthew, you want to do the drawing? Okay. Hodgin Russ, Jordan, thank you. Launch New York, Martin Davison, and Nickel City Graphics, thank you for your support. Again, it wouldn't be possible without you. And now we have 2 tickets to a Uvani event on Thursday, and Matthew is going to give those away.
So how many of you in here are familiar with Uvani? Show of hands. Okay, so a fair amount of you aren't. Uvani is the Upstate Venture Association of New York. It is a nonprofit basically structured around cultivating and increasing venture capital and access to capital in upstate New York. Unfortunately, Andy Allaire, who was supposed to be here this evening, was unable to, so I'm going to do my best to fill in on this. On Thursday, there is the Buffalo Venture Forum. It is a CEO panel featuring Ken Rosenfeld, CEO and President of eHealth Technologies, Robert Anstey, CEO of Graphics Development, and Patrick Finan, co-founder and CEO of City Dining Cards. Uvani was kind enough to give us 2 tickets for this event. And at this point, I am aware that they have sold a substantial number of tickets, so it does look like it is going to probably be a full house. Great events. There's also the Western New York Venture Association meeting tomorrow morning, I believe. But this event is for Thursday. We have collected business cards at the front desk, and we are going to draw 2 for free tickets. I'll connect with you, and we'll make sure you are on the list. So without further ado, I just dropped one. Tanner Smith and Jeffrey Garassi. Got it. Perfect. You guys can connect with me, and we'll make sure you get your tickets.
Dan Giganti. Dan's doing something really cool. It's an elevator pitch training session boot camp. So if you're an entrepreneur, having a polished elevator pitch is really important, and Dan's going to talk quickly about how we can help you get that elevator pitch down.
Hi, how's it going? I'm one of the
organizers of Founder Institute Buffalo, trying to bring Founder Institute to Buffalo. I say trying because we need to have enough people to do it. They're pretty strict. It's an international organization. What Founder Institute is, it's a 13-week program trying to turn people into founders. It's a really great program. It's really in-depth. It's a lot of work. So what we're doing now until we get enough people is just having events, talking about what we do and just trying to help. So the event, it's 2 weeks from tonight. It would have been tonight, and then this happened, is to help with your pitch. So we'll have one of our great mentors there, and we'll have people do pitches. We'll give some advice, and it'll be great. So go to fi.co, Founder Institute, and you can find the event and register there.
Thanks, Dan. So, Ace. Oh, Ace. Ace is one of the 43 North winners, so I wanted to get him on, and we're going to hear his elevator pitch real quick. Welcome to Buffalo. Here you go, Ace.
More people than I expected, especially in the snow. Apparently snow's not a thing for you guys. Who knew? I'm from Richmond, Virginia. My name is Ace. I saw there was a deuce somewhere in the room, which is kind of cool. That rarely happens. But no, I'm the CEO of Painless 1099. So we help independent contractors, freelancers, your creatives, your technologists, your Uber drivers save for their taxes. We know that so many people get nailed every year because they don't set money aside. And so we built a tool that automates the way they have taxes withheld, just like people with quote-unquote real jobs. So most of the people around DIG probably know what I'm talking about. If you're like my partner who got nailed with a $15,000 bill last year, you've been in some pain. And so we solved that problem. I'm one of the 43 North companies, just moved up from Virginia. I'm new to Buffalo. You guys don't bite nearly as hard as everybody said you did. So I am absolutely stoked to be here. My team and I, all 6 of us, are working out of the 43 North space. And we would love to chat with anybody who wants to say hey, wants to get on a Painless, or just wants to hang out, because we drink pretty well too. So come talk to us. Thanks.
Points. Another 43 North company.
Thank you. Hey everybody, Harris Maxwell from Coints. We are out of Toronto, Canada, and also a 43 North finalist this year. We are in the business of digital marketing intelligence, and essentially what that means is that, well, basically we pull in all this data around digital activation campaigns. Contests, coupons, samples, even something as simple as driving people to your website through an ad campaign to sign up for an email newsletter. Brands and agencies don't really have a way to figure out if the results they got from those types of campaigns or promotions are any good compared to anybody else. We're creating the first global benchmark for these types of campaigns to basically tell brands if their agencies are doing well, tell agencies how they can do better, and basically change the world of digital marketing. We're now here in Z80 as well. We're hiring for a couple positions, and basically anyone who's in marketing, digital marketing, or wants to be, definitely come by and chat. Thanks.
All right, so we're going to get into the startup grind now. I'm really excited because I've heard the story of Canvas Labs from Eric's partner, Michael, and I've also seen Eric be my role in a couple of interviews with Fred Wilson and Steve Case. So I'm excited to turn the tables and interview Eric. Eric is the founder of Canvas Labs and took it from its inception to the current place as a leading assessment technology platform in higher education. The Buffalo News named Canvas Labs one of the Buffalo region's most successful startups since the turn of the century. So let's hear it for Eric. We're going to get started right now. Let's clap it up and Eric.
Hello?
Hey, welcome.
Oh, there you go.
So we're talking about elevator pitches. So let's hear Canvas Labs elevator pitch.
Well, it's sort of evolved over time, but what it is today is every company in America, every industry in America has really experienced its data moment at some time. In the 70s, it was consumer products companies and grocery stores. The shopper's club card, the coupons that come out after your receipt when you go grocery shopping. And that sort of picked up steam in the 80s, and in the 90s, medical research started using data in new and unique ways. In the 2000s, the A's started to get good, and they started to write books like Moneyball, and people started becoming interested in the use of data to impact roster composition in professional sports. And all of these things were happening while higher education and colleges and universities were essentially running their campuses like they were businesses in the 40s and 50s. And those campuses and those colleges were extremely inefficient the way that they were run from a business point of view, but they were equally as sort of inefficient and not technologically savvy as it related to understanding behaviors of their students and faculty to optimize their experience and make teachers better teachers and make students better students and allow them to return and persist. That persistence is the term that, you go to college and how quickly do you get out the other side with a degree. So retention, persistence, things like that are it's what the university is supposed to be doing. So essentially we're big data for higher ed. We're trying to help colleges do a better job of educating their students and getting them through the academy. We're helping teachers become better instructors, and we're helping administrators run their campuses most effectively and most cost efficiently.
Where did the idea come from for Campus Labs?
Well, the way most businesses, I think, are started, or the way the idea sort of picks up momentum, is somebody has some unique experience, or they've seen something that no one else can see. In my case, I was on the board of trustees at UB, so it was me at the table with these university council meetings, and those meetings, I was the youngest person in the room by 30 years, and there was a lot of talk about what the campus should do in a variety of different places, and each one of these meetings were $5, 10, $20 million meetings. And I got to see that the campus themselves were sort of running without a ton of, quantifiable data direction. There was a lot of anecdotal reporting and storytelling, but there wasn't a lot of data sort of leading the conversation. And we wanted to change that, and we developed an idea to gather data from students. Those of you that are familiar with UB, one of our first projects was gathering data about transportation and parking on campus, which for those that know about that campus is a huge pain and a huge problem. And we just started doing projects like that to help bring to the board and other administrators at UB sort of data that they didn't have about the student experience. And the president of UB, Bill Greiner, who unfortunately passed away a little while ago, but was a great steward for the university, really liked what we were doing, and basically said to me, you should start a company that does this. And next thing you knew, we had 10, 15 campuses that were interested in doing something similar, and 10 years later, we have almost 1,000 campuses.
So you started it, and then you entered into the first ever Panache business plan competition. Is that correct?
Yeah. So actually, when we entered the business plan competition, we thought that the data would be most valuable for outside entities. So we were thinking, like, we're going to collect data from students, and administrators are going to care about certain pieces of data, but we're also going to collect data from students about what they eat and what cars they like to drive and what magazine subscriptions they have. And we were going to sell that data back to corporate America. That was part of the idea initially. But what happened was the interest from UB and some of the early campuses that started to subscribe to our service, we were overwhelmed with the amount of work we had to do and overwhelmed with the demand for the campuses to basically collect their own data and recycle it to the different stakeholders on campus. So very quickly we realized it was going to take a lot more time, a lot more effort. It was going to be much more expensive to knock on the doors of Pepsi and Volkswagen and MTV than it was to go to a campus, gather their permission to gather data from their students, and essentially sell the data back to the universities. That's how it started at the beginning, until we got enough technical aptitude to build a platform to really let the campuses collect the data and be self-sufficient in the way that it was collected and the way that it was used. But that took a long time to do that.
So what happened after Panache, when Panache, you start to iterate, you start to maybe change the way that you're going to go to market, and then you said you jumped to 10 campuses. So I'm guessing there was something in between, the early days. When we talk about like how did you keep going in the early days?
Well, there was a tremendous amount of self-doubt and work that went into those periods. It's ironically, it wasn't the initial period that was the most difficult, and I think that's what a lot of companies find out, because at the beginning you have an idea that you've convinced yourself is competent and you've convinced yourself is interesting. If you're a smart person and you're motivated and you can convince yourself of that reality, you're going to be able to convince a few more people of that as well. So actually, the first 10 or 20 campuses were really easy because there were other early adopters that were seeing the world the way that we were. The challenge is, how do you get, once you have all the early adopters, once you have all the people that you don't have to convince to do it, how do you get the next cohort, the people that aren't going to be easy to sign up? That was the challenge for us. Going from 1 to 20 was much easier than it was going from 20 to 50. That was the hard part. And if you do, the best part of that dilemma is that if you do a great job with 1 to 20, they'll help you with 30 to 50. So you have to do a great job for those early adopters, convince them that not only the idea that you had is the right idea, but that their use of your product is actually changing their world in ways that they should be proud of, so that they essentially sell for you. They're willing to be not just a reference, but they're willing to do PR on your behalf, meaning that you're not leading the PR. You're telling them that you're changing their world, and they're going out on their own without your prompting, and they're telling other people that you're changing their world. And that's the way that you really get the ball rolling. Because I think early on, those first couple of customers, not to diminish how difficult that is, but I think the real early adopters are much easier than sort of that second group.
So you hear entrepreneurs and startups and business people talk a lot about growth hacking and tips and techniques to increase your customer base 10%, 100%. Do you have anything that was useful for Campus Labs for growing your customer base and your revenue base?
Well, I think when you hear the term growth hackers, primarily you're talking about consumer-based businesses that are sort of accessible to anyone. We're a SaaS platform, so our world is very finite. There are 4,000 colleges in North America, so that's our customer group. So we're trying to appeal to people who are in buying positions in the higher education landscape. Not just anyone off the street can sign up and become a Campus Labs user. So usually when you're talking about growth hacking and adding large numbers of users, you're talking about consumer products, or you're talking about Facebook, you're talking about Twitter. Those products at their infancy are products that aspire to be in that realm. So our version of customer acquisition is much different than something that is a scale consumer enterprise. So our world from that point of view is very different. In our world in higher education, you really need people to learn how to speak the language, and that's probably the way that we learned it in higher ed, but in other industries as well. It's an easy tell if you go to a meeting where you're trying to gain acceptance and credibility for what you're pitching. You're able to spit out 2 or 3 things in that first 5 minutes that hopefully build your credibility for the rest of that meeting. You either show that you understand the world that the person on the other side of the table is living in, or maybe you're able to talk about a couple of instances where your product was able to do things that had a huge impact that person that you're talking to is going to be really intrigued by in order to have a conversation go in the direction you want it to. I think a lot of entrepreneurs make the mistake if they sort of get in that chair and they sort of show up and throw up, and they just start talking, and it goes on and on and on and on, and you think that you know what you want that person to understand, but they're sort of checked out once it keeps going and going and going. And I made this mistake too. I remember leaving meetings saying to myself, going crazy. I can't believe I screwed that up. So it's sort of like, Chris Farley with Paul McCartney saying, I can't believe I did that, and there's rare instances where you're going to have those venues when you have a real, credible live customer that you're talking to. So you don't want to screw up those opportunities. But the worst thing you can do is just get in that chair and just, be talking to yourself, really. You need to do some quick things to have that prospect feel like you know what you're talking about, that what you have is interesting, it's worth their time, it's worth them digging in. And usually there's things that you can sprinkle in the beginning that makes that conversation much easier.
So if I'm an entrepreneur and I see a market inefficiency or something, hey, I can do that better, but it requires a technical solution. And if I'm not a technical person, meaning I can't code, I can't build a website, do you have any advice and ways to overcome that challenge of not being a technical person?
Yeah, that was a challenge for us. I'm not a technical person. Michael, my co-founder, neither of us were technical. So we had to find people locally who were technical and who were willing to take the job. And sometimes, you're finding people who are as sort of naive and inexperienced as you. They don't know well enough to decline, and we were able to do that. And we had a group of sort of young and aspiring colleagues from UB who signed up to do some of the early work. We had a couple of sort of contractors in the Buffalo area that, when we won Panache and had a little bit of money to spend, they were able to sort of, launch us and help, add some technical aptitude or marketing or whatever it was that we needed that we didn't have from our own experience or from our own abilities. But then we switched that off and tried to hire those people as quickly as we can. I think it's a fine line when you're not technical or you're not a super experienced business person from the domain area where you're starting your business, where you need technical talent, you need marketing, you need all these things that you might not have those skills, and you rely on third parties, you rely on people externally, and then you realize how much you have to pay those people externally and how that might compare to actually having someone internally working on that problem all day, every day. And part of growing a business is really understanding when to flip that switch. And when the business is in a place where you can afford to flip the switch. Wanting to do it and being able to do it are two totally different answers.
You had said in an interview with 43 North that you think Buffalo is a good place to have a startup because there is not as many innovative or disruptive companies, and there's people that are interested in joining an effort like that. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about your thoughts on starting a startup in Buffalo and getting those type of people that you need on your team?
Yeah, I think this is a great environment to start a company because there is sort of less competition for that tech talent who might be a little less engaged in their work today. They might be working in a large enterprise where they feel as though they're not making as great of an impact, or they might not be completely satisfied with their day-to-day job, and they might be looking for something else. In other markets, those jobs, the startup jobs are plentiful. So the startups are actually competing against one another for that cohort of people who are looking for a change. I think in Buffalo, there are few of those companies, so you're able to attract that talent easier. There's not as much competition driving up the cost of that talent. And because the opportunities are fewer, you're able to add those people in efficient ways and in ways that can be cost effective, but also be exciting and motivating for the person taking the opportunity. But that requires that that Buffalo has a sustainable startup ecosystem. And I know there's a lot of people in this room that are trying to make that work because in order for the ecosystem to evolve, we need new companies starting all the time. We need companies succeeding and hiring more people, but at the same time, we also need companies failing. And I'm not saying that from a negative point of view, but companies failing in a startup ecosystem is not a terrible thing because now you have a subset of people who are working for those companies who are more willing to be in a more riskier environment. There are people who like a fast-paced startup environment, but the startup they were in didn't work. But they can go and work at another startup and we can distribute that talent to other companies who might need it, who might need to accelerate, who need to launch. So I think the key for Buffalo is going to be, can we build that ecosystem? Can we have those, third or fourth generation companies? I would think that, Campus Labs is probably a second generation company where, the ones in the very early days, some of them are still around, some of them aren't, but the Synacors, appraisal.com, those companies that you think of in the very early stages, 98 to, 2004, that were, quote unquote tech companies and doing tech company things. We started, after that, same time that Ashok and Liaison. So we're sort of the second wave, and now the third wave, I think, is some of the startups that are going through Z80 or 43 North, and they're doing their best to become relevant in their own markets and also relevant as a hiring agent and a building agent locally. It's going to be, what's the next group going to be, and how soon does that group start, and what do those companies look like? And how successful the third group are going to be in seeding that fourth group.
So your business is based on feedback, essentially. You're getting information, you're getting feedback from the students, then you have to bring that to the college, and then you're getting feedback from the college, or so you're getting feedback on what they want to see from Campus Labs platform. How can an entrepreneur take the feedback that they receive from customers and use it to build a better product and a better business?
That's a tough question that has a different answer depending on what your business is and really the scale of your user base and how quickly you're growing. There was a time at Campus Labs where the sales were sort of coming in fast and furiously. This is a good problem to have, obviously, but we didn't have enough time to really understand why those sales were happening, right? We weren't able to, categorize things that we were doing as being especially helpful or things that we were doing not being helpful enough and sort of waste of time and resources. So when you're growing, there's like a ton of inputs happening, and you have to decide which ones are meaningful and which ones, are noise. And that's a very tough thing to do, especially as you're doing it across all the disciplines of your company. You're making those decisions, and you're looking at those inputs from a sales point of view. You're looking at those inputs from a product point of view, and your product inputs are everything from what's happening inside the product. What are people using? What are people not using? How are they using it? Are they using it in unintended ways, or the ways that you're intending it to work not working? And how do you have that data? Do you have that data from your Google Analytics, or do you have that data because you're doing QA or testing your user experience, and you're looking over the shoulder of users in controlled environments? You have, what does your support look like? What's your correct support model? When are you successful in delivering support to your customers? And is there a certifiable model where one version is better than another? Like it's crazy at the beginning when you're trying to figure out what the right thing to do is and trying to figure out which of the things that you're doing are working. And sort of the great irony is it only gets more complicated the more successful you become, because then all those things start multiplying. And sort of the art of growing a company and the art of figuring it out is which one of those, what part of that feedback and what part of the data that you're getting is really meaningful, and which of it is happening almost by happenstance, because there is a distribution of that where things just sort of happen because they happen, but not for any good reason or with any true intentionality, either from your point of view or the customer's.
Was there ever a time where you did something at Campus Labs, whether it was a product or with your company, and it didn't work? And what did that teach you?
Yeah, there are days when things don't work today. It happens constantly. That's the only way to do anything innovative is to try things and see how they work and see if they work. Another irony of starting a business is that the first people to try stuff are the ones that sort of get beat up in the process, and the copycats are the ones that are the beneficiary of that work and those mistakes that you made. In the early days of Campus Labs, we had an expression that said, the first one through the wall always gets bloody. You know, it was our thought that we were going to do things to sort of push the envelope and do new things in our market. And in higher ed 10 years ago, you know, not a lot of innovation was happening, and people weren't doing a lot of really innovative things that were, you know, pushing the boundaries of a way, you know, colleges and universities should operate. So when things worked, we felt great about it. And when things didn't work, we used that as inputs like I just talked about and try to adjust things and figure out, you know, how we can maybe turn it 15 degrees to get another result. But things not working is part of the journey, and that's part of what makes a company. How much can you put out there to be consumed by your audience? How efficiently can you gather that feedback? Can you make the right decision on the right thing to do, or can you realize that you failed, but you failed for a certain reason, and maybe it's just a small adjustment that makes it totally, you know, totally different. So, you know, running a company, building a company, it's all a series of decisions if you boil it down. Do I do this or do I do that? Do I spend on this resource or do I spend on that resource? And that's what, you know, growing and product development and customer or user development, that's all those things are. One decision after another, and hopefully using the benefit of what happened when you made those earlier decisions. What was the result of those decisions? You're doing that calculus, you're recalculating that on a day by day or sometimes hour by hour minute to make good decisions.
Was there any skills that you were not particularly strong at when you started Campus Labs that you've kind of grown in that skill set?
I don't know. I don't know what skills I had when I started the company. I guess at the beginning, it's all you know, it's all tenacity and sort of intestinal fortitude, and there's not a lot of like hard skills that I could look back and say, you know, this is a skill that I had, and I was able to use that skill to get certain things done. A lot of it is, you know, just sort of you know, will and not taking no for an answer, which is not you know, a skill that can be cultivated. It's either, you know, inside of you or it's not. But I think the most difficult skill that I learned to master that is critical if you want to become successful is, you know, is how to build trust and how to build relationships and how to build a team. I'm not talking about externally. I'm talking about how to get comfortable delegating at the beginning and knowing what to delegate and knowing what not to delegate, knowing how to empower people to get the work done in a way that would represent you and represent the company, so that the feeling of your customer is the same, whether they're dealing with you as the founder and you have a perfect idea of what that experience needs to look like, or, you know, staff number 5 who's trying to learn from you and watch what you're doing and trying to emulate that experience. You can't do everything as an entrepreneur, and you get to the point where you're successful enough that if you try to do everything and you don't empower others, you don't teach others, you don't, you know, make that transition, like, you'll become a bottleneck. The company will not be successful. And I think there's some good ideas and some good companies that ultimately failed because the founder of those companies or the people that were running it didn't have the trust, or probably more likely, they didn't know how to build the trust with the people. They didn't understand that building a company is part product, but it's mostly people. You got to get the people right. You got to have the right people. You got to figure out how they can be successful. And it's not from 0 to 60 right away. You don't, you know, you don't drive a high performance car at high speeds, you know, right before you take your driving test. It happens in incremental ways. But once you can start trusting people, and once you can start, you know, delegating and empowering people to do work, then you, as the founder, can do the things that the company needs you to do in order to grow, because they're not the same things you probably did yesterday. So, you know, I don't know if I, you know, looking back, what skills I had or which ones I was able to cultivate over time. But I think that the people part of it, of who to hire, how to bring them on, when, how to build that trust and build that competency so they could represent you in the right way, and then have the company start to learn and evolve, because those people are extensions of the things that you care about and that you think are important.
So this is a question I'm stealing from you. As a early stage founder, what is something that you think I'm doing too much of? And what is something that you don't think I'm doing enough of?
You're saying if I'm a founder listening to this, well, I think you're probably not doing enough delegating. The founder is a really tough job because you not only need to optimize what you're doing today, but you have to know what comes next. And knowing what comes next in your head is great, that's part of the problem, but then how is it articulated? How is it explained? How can you demonstrate it, right? Like, those are the things that the founder needs to be paying attention to, the things that are 3 months, 6 months, 9 months out. If you're doing too much stuff today, the things that you're doing today might not be the right thing. So let's put it that way. The product might not be the right product, it might not be implemented in the right way, or you might need to make the adjustments that are necessary for the business to sort of get out of that rut. So I think looking out to the future and having a more forward-looking, optimistic view on the world is something that the founder really has to do, and that comes with vision, but it also comes with having a group of people, whether that's your co-founder, whether you have hired a bunch of people who can do the work today.
So going back to Campus Lab's journey, you're growing. When did you realize that, wow, this can be a really big company, or did it kind of just happen? You just were steadily growing and then grew into what you became today?
Well, there were a bunch of early signs. The first day that we sold in the market, we met with we were in Colorado, or I was in Colorado, and we met with the University of Northern Colorado, which is like at the tip of Colorado, right on the border of Colorado, Wyoming, and then drove down to Colorado State University, and then drove down to the University of Colorado Boulder, and all three of those schools basically bought sight unseen. We had no product. It was sort of in concept, and I knew then that we had an idea, and it was going to be up to us to screw it up, right? Because when you have a customer, you have a client. In our case, we never call them customers or clients; we call them member campuses because it's a much nicer way to create a community of users. But when you have these huge enterprises, these colleges and universities are essentially billion-dollar corporations, or corporations of a size of hundreds of millions of dollars. You go into an entity like that and explain something that you want to do, and you sort of haven't done it, you're young, you're inexperienced, you're maybe fumbling over the terminology, and they say yes. You know that you have something, you know that there's something missing in that market. So we knew then that the idea had merit. Then it was just going to be, can we build something that can scale and something that can be, responsibly sold to people with real needs and real things that they're trying to achieve, and they're willing to pay money for it. You can't, serve them a product or an experience that isn't any good, right? So could we build the product to be good enough that that we could serve even a small number of schools? We were only thinking, 50 schools, 100 schools. I remember the days, driving around where we had, very little money in our account. We were just trying to get those early schools, and I was saying to myself, wouldn't it be incredible, if we got Michigan? Wouldn't it be amazing if we got Florida or Wisconsin? Now all those schools use us for something. Some are using us for the vision that we try to project, way out in data management, data strategy, sort of the model for how we think our products could be used. And some use us for bits and pieces, but they all use us for something, right? And back then it was, wouldn't it be incredible if we could get UCLA, Now those campuses are transacting with us, and they're looking at data in our system on almost a daily basis. But thinking early on, how are we going to get this thing to work for 1,000 schools wasn't the concern. It was how are we going to get it to work for 50? And those were, complicated days. And there were times even when we got to some level of scale and some level of success, where similar to what I said earlier about the first 20 is easy, it's 20 to 50, it's more difficult. You'll have those same inflection points in whether, depending on what your technology stack is, you might have those inflection points based on hiring. Like you might be able to really easily hire the first 50 people, but what gets you from 1 to 50 is a totally different skill set and a totally different message than what's going to get you from 50 to 100 people, right? So in all areas of the company, technical or people-wise or your marketing, what helps you become successful in those first steps might not be the ingredients that you need to do the next couple of steps. And those are hard lessons to learn, and you really have to be willing to look at yourself with critical mind and understand what you might be doing wrong, or maybe adjustments that you need to make. Because when you're an entrepreneur, you're out there selling, you're trying to get someone to see it the way that you see it, you're having to, get up in different settings and show your idea in the best possible light. And it can be tricky sometimes to, make sure you're not believing your own bullshit. Not to say that your pitch is bullshit, but there's a time to be really, really assertive and show that with the idea that you have and the things that you're doing are completely correct and 100% on point, but you also have to, behind closed doors, say to yourself, what am I doing that isn't correct? What am I doing that isn't 100% on point? What are the adjustments that I can make? So you got to be able to turn off the everything's great, we're killing it, and accept your own failings is too tough of a word, but your own deficiencies, and understand how you correct them.
So Campus Labs eventually grew to a size and to a profitability that it was acquired. So can you just talk briefly about that, the process, and maybe any advice or lessons that you learned during the process of being acquired by a different company?
Well, there's not much of a process. It's quite simple, actually. Companies are bought, they're not sold. So if you have to sell your company, you're probably not going to achieve the outcome that you hope. What's going to happen is if you're doing great things and you're making an impact, someone is going to be inspired by that. It might be a company that's bigger than yours. It might be a company that is of similar size who says, we're doing great things, but if we were just aligned with this other company, we can do even better, right? This is going to come in a lot of different ways. It might come from a competitor that you're threatening, right? There's a million different ways that can manifest itself, but the best situations are the ones where you're approached and someone says to you that this is something, what you're doing is really interesting, what you're doing is really compelling, and I want to talk to you more about it, in a way that's, significant and is serious. If you're starting with the objective of being acquired or selling your business, it will not turn out the way that you hope.
So you taught a class at UB. Did you learn anything, or what was that like teaching students at UB, coming from UB, starting a business, and now being in the position that you're in?
Yeah, that was a great experience. I really, really enjoyed it. I actually, when I was getting my MBA at UB, and we already had the idea for Campus Labs, I was utilizing UB heavily for people to help us. So we knock on professors' doors, and the professor of electrical engineering helped us with our early hardware strategy of how to collect data. We literally came to his office and said, we need you to help us with this project, and we're not leaving until you help us. And he met us every Saturday morning at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, which, I was still sort of living the college lifestyle. So those meetings were tough to get up for, but he helped us. We got a lot of help from people in marketing at UB, people in the law school. So we got a tremendous amount of help from UB. So we have always felt sort of a connection to them, and have always wanted to do things that could be helpful for the school. So when I was asked to teach the course, obviously I said yes, and it was a really fun, eye-opening experience. And for me, I was teaching entrepreneurship, but I wasn't teaching, blocking and tackling. I was only trying to get students thinking about, where entrepreneurship was in the world, and really showing that it was everywhere and that it was accessible, and they can think of things in their own world and sort of turn back the clock and imagine how those things came to be. One of my favorite exercises to do in class was I'd have someone in the class identify an object that was in the class that we were going to talk about for the whole class session. Sometimes they picked a dry erase marker, sometimes they picked a chair, all these classroom objects, and we put it in the middle of the room and we talk about all the entrepreneurial activity that went into that object, right? So if you pick the dry erase marker, it's everything from, the person who sold the dye to make the color, or the company that sells the mold where the plastic goes and the plastic, becomes a shape for the marker, and then there's the shape of the cap, and there's the shape of the base, and there's the shape of the little thing in the bottom where you're able to take the top and anchor it in so you don't lose the top, right? There's all these pieces and all these parts, and they're all manufactured somehow, and then there's people who service the equipment that do the manufacturing. There's people that sell the plastic that gets injected in the molds that makes the marker, right? It goes on and on and on and on. And then you have the people who ship the product to the factory, you have the people who ship it to the store, and you have the people who are selling it in the store, and you spend an hour, and you end up with 200 companies that went into that marker showing up at UB. And you explain that at some point, those 200 companies were all, non-existent. None of those companies existed at some point. Someone had an idea that they were going to do dye better or more cost effectively than the people were doing dye before that company came along, right? And someone took a risk and someone decided to do that. And all 200 of those companies were someone's risk. And most of those people, if not all of them, are no more capable or incapable than you. These are all undergraduate students. So my goal for the course wasn't to talk to people about, business plans and, sort of textbook entrepreneurship. It was to have them walk around and identify these areas of opportunity. And maybe they started to understand openings that they have seen or that they think can be capitalized on. That was the intent of the course. And that is really fun and that's really enlightening because you get people thinking about things in new ways, and that's when the magic happens.
So my last question for you, and I ask everybody it. If Buffalo is to succeed, it needs more of what?
I think it needs more entrepreneurs and it needs more people to start companies. It's ironic, and I was talking to some people, before the talk, in the early days of Campus Labs, we were recruiting people to, leave their cushy jobs to, to come join essentially which was our startup, which was something that we were trying to build. And in some cases we were successful, in some cases people didn't want to take the risk. The irony now is that we're the cushy job. I think that Campus Labs is a really, fantastic environment where people can work and feel like they're making a contribution, and we still have a lot of startup DNA. We're still moving at the speed of light, doing some great things, but it would be, really counterproductive and sort of, I'm trying to think of the right word, but, it would not be honest of me to have the people at Campus Labs who think that they want to start their own company for me to say, yeah, you don't want to do that. You want to stay here because, I was convinced to do something else, 5 or 6 years ago. So it's going to need people to leave their jobs and create companies. My heart breaks, and it is a bittersweet moment when someone leaves Campus Labs to join another startup. But I'm happy when it happens. I don't want people from Campus Labs to leave their jobs, but I want companies to be started, and you just can't have it both ways. So I'm happy to see a startup ecosystem, start to evolve. I want to see it evolve because I think that is a place where we can do great things as a community because the economics of running a business in Buffalo are very, very favorable. The economics of starting a business in Buffalo are even more favorable. The only thing that is less ideal or imperfect is the workforce's willingness to take risk. And staffing companies, even early on, when you don't have to ask people to leave their job on the first day. It might be, let's meet, we're going to do some work from 6 to 9, 3 nights a week, and then when you have confidence in the company and I have confidence with you as a colleague or a coworker, we'll pull the trigger when we're both ready. I don't see enough of that going on, and I think that's sort of the middle area that needs to evolve. Both people, building more companies and sort of the workforce being more willing to do innovative things and take the risks that are going to allow those upstart companies and those incubated companies to take big steps forward. But it's a two-way street. It's both the companies getting started and the people, being more willing to take risks and do innovative things.
Awesome. I'm going to open it up to you. Questions, audience? Dave.
So I have a weird question. It's basically about being comfortable spending money. So I started my company back in like February or March, and at that time I was like really nervous about spending even like $300. Not nervous, just really, I wanted to make sure I got that return. I was worried about testing stuff, I guess. Now I'm to a point, we're launched on Kickstarter. We have $220,000 or something like that in pre-orders, and I'm starting to get more comfortable spending money on like advertising and stuff like that. So thinking back to the early days of Campus Labs, I want to know like how you grew getting more and more comfortable spending money to test ideas.
Yeah, I'll be frank with you. I'm not comfortable now spending money. So I fret over spending $300 that isn't necessary now. I still do. And we're still trying to find ways to be, the most capital efficient without, doing it in a way that's sort of counterproductive. And you can waste a lot of time worrying and doing nothing when you should be doing something because, you have the affliction, as I like to call it, of not affliction against spending money, but making sure that you're getting value for what you're spending it on. And part of it is the money and the sort of goods you're acquiring, but also the side that I think you have to appreciate more, you have to take more into consideration is, okay, I've bought this thing, I own this thing, I have some hours, I subscribe to the service. What am I going to do with it? Do I have the time and the bandwidth to take advantage of what I've bought or what I'm going to use? Am I better off doing this in another week or in another month when I have a better plan and I'm ready to go with whatever benefit I'm supposed to be getting from that spend? And I think that people fret over the dollars. The dollars, I think, is relatively easy. I think the hard part is I spend that money. I'm spending money for something that I value. What am I getting out of that transaction? What's going to happen next? And am I ready to put in the time that's necessary to get the maximum amount of value? So I like to think about it like I want to be ready for when I buy something. I'm ready for that to happen. I'm actually famous inside of our organization to say, okay, we're going to do this, and we're going to talk to the provider, and the provider's going to tell us what we need to do in order to make optimal use of that person or that service. Give us homework. We'll do those things, and 60 days from now, when we buy, we'll have already done the work, and then we'll be making great use of it on the first day rather than paying full freight on the first day, and for those first 2 months, we're getting 10% of the value because we're not set up to get maximum value out of it. So a lot of times I'll say, we're interested in using your service, tell us what we have to do over the next 60 or 90 days so that when we're ready to buy it, we're hitting the ground running and we're not standing there looking at each other saying, oh, we better do this, we got to do this, we got to do these things in order to make it work for us.
Just curious if you have any insights you can share about building culture in the really early days?
Yeah, culture and people, that's like I said earlier, that's really the key. There's a famous line, I don't know who said it, but it's been repeated over and over again that, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And it really is true, because without the people, you have no chance. And culture is the emotional embodiment of you as a founder. Your culture is a reflection of you, of the product, of the people, of the way that you execute. If your culture isn't right, it's not the people that you hired. If the culture's not right, the problem is you. It's that you haven't led people to the right way of performing and doing their jobs. That is what you feel like your company needs to be in order for it to be successful in its market. So, culture, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, depending on what market that you're in, depending on how many people who work at your company, depending on the nature of the product that you sell or you build. So it's tough to generalize and say, this is how you do culture, but the culture is you.
Hi. You had talked before about startup culture and the momentum you can get as a startup. How do you, as time goes on and your company grows, how do you keep that momentum going?
Yeah, that's a huge challenge, because culture is going to evolve. It's very different from 5 people to 10 people to 50 people to 100 people. That's the trick. And the companies that are highly performant are the ones that don't just scale technically, or they don't just scale people, but the culture skills. And that takes a lot of time and attention by the founders. It takes doing things that may not be directly meaningful to the typical business calculus or the typical sort of business objectives, but they are things that you are doing specifically to get the culture right. And I do them still. I love doing them. I think what's made Campus Labs evolve to a really great place. I think it's what has allowed Campus Labs to sort of evolve over a period of time, where we were a startup and then an emerging company and then a company that was more solid, and sort of going through 2 acquisitions that had its ups and downs. Looking back, the people who are on the leadership team of Campus Labs is largely the exact same group who were on the leadership team of Campus Labs before any of that happened. And I'm not the one who's going to take credit for that, but the culture takes credit for that. That the people have stayed because they're enrolled in a mission that we are on, and things that we're trying to achieve, and an objective that we want to see happen in our market and in our world. And people are not satisfied with their professional career or their personal career, their personal lives, until we achieve that objective. And that is the job of the leader and the job of the culture, to enroll people that this is what we're going to do, this is why we're doing it, this is how we're going to do it, and this is what's going to happen if we're right, and this is what's going to happen if we're successful. And if you get the right type of people, between your stewardship as the founder and those people adding to the culture and steering you in the right way and showing you, them teaching you how to manage in the same way that you're trying to impress upon them of the things that you want them to do. If you got the right early hires with the right company, it all sort of happens. Culture is a lot like, I think it's a lot like early marriage or getting engaged. When it happens for the right reason and it sort of like just flows and happens naturally, you get great results. When there's too many things that are forced, it's probably not right. So those are the situations people need to look at themselves and decide whether it is right or not. So if you do it the right way, it's all very natural and it all flows well.
My question is probably pretty much in line with what his last question was. Well, we know, like within the first phases, the startup is a grind, which it is. You have to grind through a lot when you're starting a business. But when you get into the next phase of your business, how is it that you sustain your business growth, sustain your revenues, your margins you have in the business, and your future, and continue to grow? What is it you look for? How do you do that?
Well, some of the financial metrics that you talked about are, they're going to be very different depending on what your goals are. I'm not too concerned about margin or expenses depending on what you're trying to achieve. Is your company supposed to be, perfect tomorrow, or is it going to be perfect 3 years from now? Because there's a bunch of products or things that you need to do between now and 3 years from now that's going to make the company, right? So I don't get too bogged down in month by month or quarter by quarter financials. Now, at the beginning of the business, when cash is your life, and that's the difference between the company existing or being insolvent, then you definitely worry about cash, and your decision process of to spend that $300 is very, very different. But as the company grows and scales, I think it's important to sort of break up the horizon differently depending on what your objectives are. Where are you trying to get to? And what do you have to do in these different, incremental time periods to allow you to reach those places? I think that you can get too wrapped up in the day-to-day when there's no end in sight. I don't want to say there's a finish line, because in building a company in sort of well-done entrepreneurial ventures, there is no finish line. But to build those benchmarks of where you want to get to in a certain amount of time, that's going to unlock the next opportunity that's going to move you forward. I think that's really important, that chopping it up and building some of those checkpoints that you want to get to, and then have the discipline yourself to do those things, I think is really important. At the beginning of Campus Labs, we had no board of directors, we had no oversight, and it was great to have that freedom. But we had the discipline of engaging local business people in the community who were able to give us their time, and we sat with them, sometimes on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, or whenever we could get the time to try to instill that discipline, to try to get beat up a little bit. And there's people in this room who know some of those stories, and some of them are pretty entertaining, where, I think I'm doing a great job, I think this company's really making it, and you sit with someone who's, made it at a level 10 or 50 or 100 times greater, and they're doing nothing but, poking holes in your success. And sometimes you need the discipline that you're going to go in and you're going to get beat up, but it's also really helpful to have outside perspectives and outside feedback. The only caveat that I'll tell you is, your business better than anyone else. You get a lot of advice about, you should do this or you should do that. It's your job as the founder to sort of determine which of that advice actually applies to you, into your situation, in your market, and not which advice. Some advice you'll get is reasonable advice. It's completely reasonable for that person to draw that conclusion, but only you know if it applies to you. So, I think chopping it up, and the discipline to perform, the discipline to get feedback from people who have been there, they're all really important things.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Hopefully you learned something. Eric, you can stick around. Welcome to ask some questions. If there's any beer or food left, you're welcome to grab something for the road. And thank you so much. And we're going to announce our next event for February very soon, so keep your eyes open for that. Thank you. Thanks, Eric.